Hello, everyone. This is Coach Oliver once again. Welcome to the final day of the American Cup 2022. And the winner for the men's section is Fabiano Caruana, winning over Levon Aronian 1.5 to 0.5. Okay, 1.5 to 0.5. And it ended the way it started. Aronian actually started the American Cup by a win using the English. And in the end, it was Caruana winning the tournament with the English. Let's check it out. The last game of the tournament, all for the marbles. Caruana started with c4, so the English. Knight into f6, knight to c3, e5. So we have the reverse Sicilian, with c4 and e5. Knight into f3, knight c6. Okay, we have 4 knights. g3, knight into d4. Bishop g2, knight takes f3, bishop takes, bishop c5, d3, castles, castles. And here Aronian played a new move with a5, okay, a novelty on his 8th move. Previously, h6 was played in this position. Okay, the main point of h6 is to stop ideas of bishop g5, take on f6, and knight into e4. In that game, Aronian actually was playing the white side against Wang Hao. It continued with bishop g2, c6, bishop to d2, bishop c1, e4, h3. This pawn creating a V shape that symbols victory here. a4 stopping b5. b8, we have king h2, bishop e3, f4, the main point of king h2, moving out of this diagonal to push this pawn to f4. Rook to c2, trying to shift to the king with rook c f2. Bishop f3, it takes, bishop h5, hitting the f7 pawn. Now after the take, Aronian had this take and then queen d5 and went on to win the game. All right, back to the real game with Aronian's novelty a5. Right. The point also of playing a5 is to stop white from a3 and b4 expansion on the queen side. Bishop g2 back. c6, trying to go for d5. But d5 is not possible yet because bishop g5 here. So bishop d2, waiting for d5. Now, if black plays d5, c takes. If let's say you go pawn takes, okay, I can go bishop g5 here, or I can also go for queen to b3, or even rook c1. Okay, the reason why I put my bishop on d2 is to clear that line for the rook, with the potential discovered attack on the bishop in c5. So Aronian went for d6. a3, bishop into e6, queen to c2. Again, stopping or preventing black from pushing that pawn on d5. Because if you push, for example, I have this take and an attack on the c5 later on once the knight moves. h6, knight into a4, hitting the bishop, bishop a7, c5, takes, takes. So now we have 2 bishops for white. Bishop into d5, keeping the bishop. An important g2 bishop that protects your king on G1. Pawn into A4, nailing the pawn on A3 and B2. E4, knight D7. White has a problem on D3, but he's able to solve it with some F4 and rook F3 ideas later in the game. Queen into E3, keeping an eye on the dark square, not allowing queen B6 to queen B2. Okay, bishop to B3, taking away also the D1 square. F4, all right. Queen into B6, takes. Black should be happy with rook D8, attacking the backward pawn on D3. Rook AC1, rook D8, okay, rook F3, protecting D3. Knight goes back to D7. Nice move by Caruana with bishop H3, hitting the knight. Bishop E6, I don't like bishop E6 here. There are many ways to play for Levon, or maybe he was worried that if he plays, let's say, rook A6, C8 and C5, there goes bishop A5. Yeah. B6, maybe bishop takes. Well, this is equal because white will be one pawn up, but the opposite colored bishop and this backward pawn should be enough compensation for black. Bishop E6. The problem starts with this move. First is this, takes on E6. Of course, a double pawn. Although black was going to take on F4, King F2, but he didn't. Well, let's take a look at takes. If takes, and G takes F4. And then D4 is coming up later in the game, and maybe King E3, yeah. Or even rook to G3, rook G1. Nice move by Caruana, this King F2, yeah. Clearing the line for the G file. Also for the rooks to double up on the G7 pawn, plus bishop C3 is also a big problem for black. So that's the reason why Aronian kept his pawn on E5 to at least block that diagonal from A1 to H8. King E2, right, important. Not only is the king clears the G1 square, but more importantly, it protects that backward pawn on D3. B6, okay, to give freedom to the knight on D7. Bishop C3. Aronian doesn't want to take on F4. He played rook ACA. Caruana went for rook F1. He really doesn't want to take rook F8. King E3 first. He doesn't want, yeah, for the nth time. And finally, Caruana captured the pawn. The question is why? Okay, let's start from this position. Okay, if you take on F4, again, G takes. The pressure on G7 is enormous, yeah, with rook G3, rook G1, and this bishop. It's tough to defend. Yeah. Let's say you start with the move rook F8. I can also push that pawn on F5, yes. Or even rook G1 straight away. If you play rook F7, then rook FG3. That's stoppable threat. It will be too late to push for E5 here. Can even take and go for E6. Or just F5 here, F5, F6. Then have H4. Okay. The pawn becomes a target, extra pawn, plus precise calculation here by Caruana. Typical of the informed Fabi. I think Fabi is back here in this tournament. back to his element. Rook takes f1, knight into b8, d4, takes. Black gets the second rank. All right. But white has counterplay on the d file, d8 or d6. Bishop into c3, protecting both pawns, b2 and e5. Rook takes h2, rook d6, of course. Hitting the pawn on b6, knight on c6, and pawn on e6. Knight into a5, a tricky move. And Fabi was very aware of that one. He had a sense of danger, king f3. Now, let's take a look at rook takes e6. Rook takes e6 is actually a mistake. It's now king f7. Your rook has nowhere to go. That was tricky. You thought that it's free, but no. You cannot go back to d6 because of the double attack on c4, right? You cannot also take the pawn. It's the same thing. There's knight c4. All right. These elite players are pretty strong in their calculation. And the most important thing is this sense of danger. King f7. Now it's time to take on b6. Knight into c4, rook b7, of course, rook on the 7th. Asking the question for black, where is he going to put the king? Is it f8? Is it e8? g6 or g8? Now there are 4 squares that the king can go. In the game, king e8 was played. Now let's take a look at g8. Now, g8, you don't protect the e7 square. So rook e7 and then rook takes e6. Same goes with king g6. That's rook e7 and rook takes e6 comes with a check. That's this pass pawn. If you go king f8, then maybe white can use rook b4 here, hitting the knight, hitting the pawn, and later some bishop b4 check on the king. So Aronian went for king e8, but the king moves away from protecting the g7 pawn. Why not? In endgames, a pawn is a pawn. Just take it. Knight takes b2, no problem. Bishop into b4. Now this pawn is another target after this bishop, protecting the e7 square. King to d8, rook e7. Rook takes e6. 2 pawns up. h5. Bishop d6. Aronian tries to eliminate all the pawns, but this pawn is just so fast. This e5 pawn. Let's take a look. Starts with rook g6. Good move. Rook h3. Aronian's hope here is to exchange on g3, put that king on e6, and probably hold a draw. But it's one move slow. Or g8. Nice move by Caruana. Rook to g7. King goes to e8. Now rook c7. Okay. The right timing. Hitting the knight on c4, avoiding the exchange on g3. Rook takes, king. You now will help this pawn. All right. King can also go f5 and e6 here with a potential mate on c8. Aronian went for knight takes d6, takes, rook takes a3. All right. Actually, we have 2 pawns each for white and black. But white's pawns are more dangerous, and the pawn on d6 is more advanced. Plus the position of the king. The most important is the king's position. The black king is tied up to the last rank. So there's a potential checkmate. Yeah. Even here, okay, Caruana went for king f5, but he could actually just push that pawn on e5. Yeah. Let's say, for example, you push this pawn on h3, the e6. Rook on c8 is going to be checkmate. So you have to move your king, let's say f8, but now e7. If you go back to E8, there's rook C8 and then promote. If you go king F7, it's the same thing, rook C8 and then promote. The king stops that square. And even if you go, rook here, let's say after E5, you go rook to D3. Now I can use my king to F5 to push this pawn, for example. It's the king going to E6, another mate on C8 coming up. If you play king D8, rook H7, hitting the pawn on H4, threatening mate on H8. You move away, take H4, you push this pawn, for example, now rook from behind, Tarashurul. Rook gets to the pawn, and if this one, just king E7, E6, and D7, the importance of connected pass pawns. All right, but even then, king F5 is also, of course, winning. Aronian went for rook G3. Well, he was hoping the king E6, he will play rook G6 check, but now E5. And finally, he resigned, and with the resignation, Caruana wins the inaugural American Cup 2022, a well-deserving winner. Although it could have been a different story if he lost that Armageddon to Jeffrey Chong in the first round. But this is Caruana's tournament, yeah. That was his only bad day, almost bad day, that first round. But after that, it was smooth sailing for Fabi. The fabulous Caruana is back to his winning ways. And with that, Caruana wins 50,000 USD for first place, plus an additional of 10,000 USD for staying in the championship bracket without losing a match. The only player not losing a single match. That's Fabiano Caruana. All right, congratulations to Fabi for winning the American Cup 2022. I also want to thank you guys for supporting our channel, Charts Max Chess and Charts Max Entertainment on Facebook and YouTube. This is Coach Oliver. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.